it back at some point. Let's pray. Let's pray first. Almighty God, most high, most merciful, let us listen for you in the dark of night. Amen. Okay. So I feel like I should make a joke or something just to like break this like tense ice. So I'm feeling it too, so I'm like, you're probably feeling it. But I don't have one, so I'm glad that made you laugh. This is the first sermon I think I've done that doesn't feel, at least to me, even as I was preparing, like sermon. Like it's the first time I don't have like a script. It's the first time that I feel like I'm coming without like prescriptions either. I'm not here to tell you vote or don't vote. Honestly, I'm here, I guess, just to share things that I've been listening, voices, sounds, fears, in myself. So many people I've gotten to know, so many friends I've gotten to make, so many just things I've gotten to witness. And so I really just have like a bunch of scribbles, and we'll see how those, there's like a line in my mind. But hopefully that allows it to be a little more real. Because I think I want to share about, no, not I think, like I want to speak to this more ancient evil that shows up by different names in different places at different times for longer than we even know, for longer than time itself, perhaps. And I want to share a little bit, look it in the eye together, because times are changing. And, you know, there's a lot of different people I've heard say, oh, well, you know, every generation has its own kind of like feeling in the moments of, well, this is the apocalyptic time. This is the apocalyptic time. This is the apocalyptic time. And perhaps it's true. And there are for many communities and for many moments, like there is like particular like apocalypses, like we spoke about at the retreat last weekend. But there's something about this time that I've just been asking myself, because there's been this kind of question that I heard from somebody else a long time ago. If anyone has heard of Grace Lee Boggs, a philosopher, an activist, Asian American woman from Detroit, who died, I believe, at 98 or so, about 5 or 6 years ago. And she asked this question in the 70s and kept asking it over and over. What time is it on the clock of the world? What time is it on the clock of the world? And then she spent her life with her communities trying to answer that. It's because she said, if we don't understand what time it is on the clock of the world, then we don't really know what we're meant to do. And the things we do tend to be just to kind of like busy ourselves, basically. Even if they're good things, she always had this spirit that was just, there's no judgment in her, but she just kind of spoke the truth without judgment. She was like, you know, it's great that like in the 70s, you know, she was like, that we're doing a lot of like feeding people here on the streets, but she was like, but we're in the midst of this historical moment of revolution the world over that is teaching people to ask the question, like not only like how do we feed the poor, but why are people poor and what do we do about that? You know, and so that led her to ask herself, what would revolution look like in the United States? And she was believed in nonviolence. And so she was like trying to weave a lot of these things together, but that was her in her time, right? And so I've been asking myself, what time is it on the clock of the world? And so I guess I want to start by, well, before I share a story that has helped make sense of a lot of this for me, I guess I want to say I feel really nervous and anxious and like it feels weird like being up here, like, you know, because even though I feel like I keep trying to just like make it not like this authoritative word, there's something about the setup of what like sermons are and preachers are and the expectations we have of them, where it's like, even if the preacher or the community keeps telling themselves like, oh no, this is horizontal, there is like this ingrained embodied thing where we feel like we listen to whoever is up there at any given moment in a different way. And so maybe let me just say, I'm basically plagiarizing everything I'm going to say today, and hopefully that makes it feel better. None of this is new. None of this is mine. None of this is original. I'll just say out loud some names so that you can go listen to them. I already said Grace Lee Boggs. I will say Vincent Harding. I will say Martin Luther King Jr. I will say the Zapatistas. I will say, and so the Zapatistas tell this story. The Zapatistas are a community in southern Mexico, for those of you who don't know, of indigenous and non-indigenous people who, since 1982, have been very slowly, kind of like Mennonites, just like slow, like, you know, like turtles, like snails, just like slowly, patiently building this kind of different reality, because they, as indigenous people, have said, we've been surviving apocalypse for so long. And they're like, but this attempt for us to fight the system and take over state power, it's just not working for us. And so we have realized we need to build from below. And so since 1982, they've been organizing, and to this day, they are a community of tens of thousands of people with self-organized like healthcare infrastructure, food production, cultural production, security and safety, and they're by no means perfect, and they actually are very transparent about that. They invite people from the outside constantly to their communities to have exchanges of knowledge of how to be able to build a different world, and also so that, and they say this, so people can see just how clunky and messy and painful this all is. From the internal conflict and dynamics that happen amongst them and the internal divisions amongst them, all the way to like, they also face a lot of repression because they're building a different world. And so in 2015, they invited 5,000 people from every continent to their community, and they shared a story. They shared the story of Noah's Ark. So they say that from the mountains of the Mexican southeast, they climb to the top and they look out at the horizon. They look at the oceans on the one side, they look at the oceans on the other side, they look at the mountains on the north and the plains in the south, and they see all around a storm that is coming. And they see that this storm has been brewing and brewing and growing. And they said, we Zapatistas, and maybe this is all I want to do today. I want to just channel the Zapatista spirits, which I think channels the Spirit of God. They said, all we're doing is trying to ring a bell. We're trying to ring a bell really loud. Because they say, the storm, we have been living through this storm and surviving it for 500 years, but this storm is coming to more people at faster increments in more places. And they say, what we do as we ring the bell, we're ringing it by building an ark. Because they're like, we've seen for 500 years, and I wonder how many of us have been seeing some of this last year. They said they say it doesn't matter what color of party we elect, this one or that one. Things are still just, in the macro picture, still sliding like down to the worst. Trump was not meant to come back. Biden was meant to defeat fascism. Trump is back with a rage, and so is his base, and so is Project 2025. So again, vote, don't vote. But like, let's just look at it with clarity. Like, vote your conscience. You know, like, we're all about conscience, Mennonites. But when we look ahead, this storm is coming, and it's here. How many of us have felt increased anxiety about things like housing, about access to just basic resources to be able to like prepare for our children's future? I'm really scared for Noah's future. And so the Zapatistas say, we're building an ark. And we tell you, all of y'all, like, build arks. And so I kept thinking, how do I tie all this in with this sacred time of our dead? How to invite our dead into this, and all of the storms that they have survived and endured that live in us. How do we look back so that we can look forward? Because looking forward feels really freaking scary. And I know this for a fact in our community, because this is me. I am PMC. We are all each other's. The anxiety, the fear, the powerlessness that we can feel in the face of all these big things. Like, I was worried of sharing this story because I was like, then we walk out and it's like, holy crap, there's a storm. Like, what are we going to do? You know? It's like, there have even been presidents at the United Nations who said what Israel and the United States are doing to Gaza is just a laboratory experiment, a show of force, so that the rest of the world can also know what will happen to you if you misbehave. That was Gustavo Petro from Colombia, and it was echoed in a statement by a lot of other heads of state. And I'm not defending heads of state, I'm a Mennonite. But, you know, everyone can speak some truth at times. And so my story, in the breakout last week, in the retreat, I went to the war thing with the horsemen of the apocalypse. For those of you who weren't there, there was like different stations of like, you know, what was it, like militarism and war, capitalism, economic, like dispossession, like ecological devastation, and people went to different ones, and we got to share, you know, like our feelings and our thoughts and why we went to this one. And there's a lot of people I put here who had to survive war. My abuelita Carmen, my dad's mom, she was born in Madrid, and she was 3 when Franco came to power and took power, and you know, fascism started spreading across Spain, and my grandma was internally displaced to Santander. Never talked about it. Until she died, I found out from my aunts and my dad. Now all the pain that she passed on to us made more sense. My grandpa Frank, who I'm named after, you know, like many boys then and now, found a way out of the painful life by joining the army. In his case, it was the British Army. And it was right when pre-Israel Zionist militias were battling it out with the Brits. And so, you know, no one's thinking about Palestinians. Like, just, that wasn't part of the story for them. But my grandpa was deployed there, and after my grandma died, and one of those times, you know, where like family secrets come out, and like once every 10 years when there's like a big thing that happens and everyone's vulnerable, and suddenly it's like, oh my God, my family's crazy. Like, this history is crazy, you know? Like, but then we don't talk about it again for 10 years. like that. I found out like that, that when my dad was a teenager and he woke up late at night and kind of was going downstairs and he heard that my grandpa and all his army buddies were in the basement drunk, talking, sharing stories, and they were all talking about when they had to kill, just like shoot down like a line of people. I was dating Erica the first time that, because of my wonderful wife's chattiness, she got my mom comfortable enough within a couple hours of meeting her for my mom to open up and share something that I had never heard in my life, which is that my tío Mauricio, I didn't know I had a tío Mauricio because he was disappeared by the Guatemalan army during the armed conflict. He was a student, and him and a bunch of his friends disappeared, and no one has ever found their body. Y'all know about Stephen. Stephen is right here with us. In 2020, Erica's sibling Julia happened to live 4 or 5 blocks away from where George Floyd was assassinated. Julia was out from day one with their entire community. And I still remember that night, us in lockdown in our house, and Julia calling us and being like, dude, there's white supremacists in trucks with American flags shooting in the air down our street. And then soon after, there's Humvees of the National Guard pointing guns at us to tell us to stay inside and threatening to shoot people who walk out. I still remember Lisa in 2020. I've shared this story publicly before and you've been okay with it. Is it okay? Lisa in 2020, when a large group of us from PMC went out that first massive day of mobilizations after George Floyd was killed, and there was 50,000 people or more out in the streets of LA. It's the one that's in all the archives because of that one cop car that was just up in flames, and it was all over the front pages. But that day, I don't know how many of you knew, when organizers were saying, like, we need white people to the front because it's less likely that the cops will, like, take out their rage and their repression on y'all. Lisa was, I don't remember how it happened, but somehow Lisa was up close. Lisa ended up being shot by a rubber bullet. You know, we elected Biden, and I didn't know this until recently, but you know that doomsday clock, that like you know, the minutes to midnight with like nuclear war and you know all this. I heard like a couple months ago on Democracy Now! That it is actually closer to nuclear war than it was during any moment of the Cold War, when everyone was talking about it and freaked out and like it was just like a panic. We're actually more likely to be at nuclear war right now than we have ever been. And I don't need to tell you about climate catastrophe. This church has taught me about that in ways that I just maybe didn't even really believe before being here. We all carry these types of stories in our bones, and that's why I also want to invite you to say out loud the name of your dead, who you love, who you're inspired by, those whose pain and whose stories you carry in your bones, whether you know the stories or not. Maybe there's a story that went to the grave with your ancestors, but it is not in the grave totally because it is in your bones and in your flesh. And so for one moment, I want to invite you, just popcorn, you can speak over each other. Even if you didn't bring a picture, just say out loud 2 or 3 names of people who are with you, who live with you, as we look back before we look forward. I want to say, like, as we look back, as we consider, as we breathe in, as we name all of this pain, all of this storm, I want to say something very specific to this community. And I don't know, I didn't think I was going to say it, but that's the benefit of not having a script. I can just say it now to you because I felt right. um, you did not choose to be born or raised where you were. You did not choose to be born or raised the way you did. You did not choose for the things that have happened to you to happen to you. And there's so many people here who love you. There's so many people here who will look you in the eye if we can actually come together like this in this kind of intimate, messy, spilling over, cracked and scattered and broken kind of way. Because what we can do now, and this is where, for all my Mennonite theology that I'm like almost all there, like there's this part that I want to draw as I look forward from my, I was going to say my mom, because yes, but like she's not dead yet. My mom got it from my bisabuelita Fia. Noah and I decorated this for Dia de los Muertos, so that's Noah. I would have done it nicer. This is my great grandma, mi bisabuelita Fia, Sofia, who my mom is named after. The only story I have of her is my mom saying, "Oh, I remember anytime I was at her house, if I would wake up early or like I had to go up to the bathroom, it was 3 a.m., 4 a.m., I just have these like blurry images of her like on her knees praying at night and praying through the night. A vigil, standing watch. Maybe that's how I like to think of it. Praying for her descendants? I don't know, maybe. I like to think that. You did not choose to be born or raised the way you were. We feel a lot of shame in this community. We carry a lot of guilt for many things that we didn't have a choice over, that our parents may not have fully had a choice over. I want that spirit and that prayer of mi abuelita Fia to come with us now as we think of what do we have choices over now together, because this is impossible alone. I don't know about you, but every time I try and get out ahead and just like be better and be more moral and make the better choices alone, I end up feeling ashamed or guilty or not enough or like I failed or self-righteous and like I'm better than others. Like it's just like, it's horrible. It's this like messed up spiral. And then it makes it harder to come to others, to you. And so I guess I want to say to you, like, I'm scared for the future and I need you. I really need you so that Noah, this is Noah's Ark, this church. We don't have fucking, like, sorry, there's kids here. We don't have freaking big retirement fund set so that we can just like ride off to the sunset with ourselves and not worry about Noah. I don't know how the heck we're gonna ever send Noah to college. I mean, he'll go to, if there's still schools and teachers and not just, machines teaching them. I'm scared for what will happen, whether it's Trump or whether it's in 8 years, another person. Because my abuelita Conchita just told me in Guatemala this September, for the first time ever, another one of the stories you never know. For work, I had to research a lot about the 1954 coup against the Guatemalan president Arbenz, which was CIA orchestrated, and so I've been thinking about it, but then I like had never dared to ask my abuelita. And I asked her, because she was 14 at the time. And the only memory she had, and she told me, she was like, oh yeah, I remember like the sounds of the bombs in the distance. You know, and she was like, and I remember like these planes, and we would call them los sulfatos. Los sulfatos means like the sulfates. And I was like, oh, why did they call them that? Oh, because you were essing yourself when you heard them coming. You know, and so it became like a dark humor, kind of lighthearted way for people to just cope with like, you know, airplanes who drop bombs. I had just learned that those had been expedited by the State Department and Eisenhower's administration. Eisenhower, 1954? Anyway. And so they were US planes because the Guatemalan government had been able to actually withstand the initial ground invasion. So then the US expedited those planes that my grandma has the memory in her bones, in her heart. And that she told me, she's like, I hadn't thought about that in ever, you know? Times are really changing. Right now, we make sense of it with a lot of concepts that we can easily summarize as isms, right? And those are helpful. But they're nothing but concepts to make sense of this deep, dark evil that the Bible called Satan, the Bible called the beast, you know, that the Zapatistas call the many-headed hydra. They call it the storm. We call it, I call it the CIA. This deeper, darker evil is much more ancient. And yet, last week there was this passage that was read when Dan had his little crown. It was like, you know, from Daniel. And I went back and I read Daniel about these visions and these monsters rising from the sea. And then that echoed immediately with Revelation, which in Spanish is actually titled Apocalipsis, Apocalypse. And they're filled with these visions. And so I guess I just want to end by, I don't know, sharing this, I don't know, these visions I've gotten that are not crazy because they're actually rooted in reality, but of our little community here, PMC. I've had this vision of so many people here love gardening and doing gardens, and everyone has gardens in their backyards or front yards. Or I had this vision of all of us like organizing in this like collectivized way, like with like, I need all my practical people. Like I do all the like philosophizing and like the feeling, like that comes naturally to me. My wife is always like, but what's the practical? Like how does this like practically work? You know, what is this, like how do you do this? What does this mean? You know, like the storm is coming, building an ark. Like what is that? You know, like actually like having like like people who love gardening starting to visit each other like once a month. It's like each person's like different yard, and you all start, we all start like, I said y'all because I love the idea of gardening. I would love to love it more. And then starting to think with this like broad macro picture of like, and bear with me with like the dialectic of the apocalyptic to the like building the ark of like, you saw with the pandemic how easy it is to lose all access to all the most essential needs of our life. Like, sci-fi movies show us things that then we think, oh, that's just sci-fi, but it's like my grandma grew up hearing bombs fall. We have friends now who have had over 100 family members mutilated and exterminated under the rubble with our taxes. Like, apocalypse is in our bones. It's in our flesh. And so I have this vision of it takes a lot of practical people's efforts to organize, you know, something that will be able to give us a degree of self-sustenance. And to do that at scale is actually like insane. But even just like rehearsing those skills to organize the things we already do in our life. You know, it's like gardening. We're already doing the things. It's just about organizing it more, about coordinating it more, about making it more collective. I had the same vision. I have the same vision for housing. There's people here who have ADUs, who have extra rooms, and who are already hosting people. People who have garages, where it's like, I mean, I told Katerina in a meeting before prepping where I was like, I'm gonna invite the church to just like embrace like the criminality of the Mennonite tradition. And I was like, no, that's too much for this sermon. But I was like, I was just gonna say like, sure, building codes this, building codes that. But like when there's like National Guard deployed, because Bert and I were just at a meeting with undocumented migrants who were saying, how do we prepare for the worst? If Trump actually, just imagine Trump can actually do the most extreme things he says. At that point, it's like, okay, I imagine us being coordinated to already be able to just take people in because of the relationships we have. To actually be able to do the whole like romantic Anne Frank thing that we all grew up loving and thinking was super like, oh, sad and cute, but it's like, no, like it is a huge risk. But like, what else is following Jesus? Jesus told his disciples, count the cost before you follow me. And a lot decided, and maybe this is like for us ultimately to just together share in this facing this reality. We have to do it together, but there is a small element where it's not individualism, it's just that heart piece where each of us has to make the decision, like what can I contribute and what can I not, and that's okay. Like it's not like not everyone, there's this image of everyone has to like be MLK giving a speech at like, to 10,000 people, or that it means like shutting down a highway, that's what it means to like do a better world. We've seen that like shutting down highways has such a limitation, and giving big speeches, it's like the bombs are still dropping and the storm is still coming. So everything has a place, it's a whole ecosystem. But I have this vision with gardens, with housing. That's just two, and I'm probably over my time. So I'll just say that I think, what time is it on the clock of the world? It is an apocalyptic time, because that storm is a little bit different. And this is the words of the Zapatistas, who have survived it as indigenous people in southern Mexico. They said, yes, every generation and every geography has had its own ends of the world. But they said, but the potential for nuclear escalation and climate catastrophe are in breadth and just the scope of the potential destruction and what it takes to stop it. They said that their opinion is that the way, just based on an analysis of how the system works, like there's no stopping the climate catastrophe. It's just gonna happen. And it's gonna happen as bad as we imagine it. And so that's why they end with the arks. And they say, we're building an ark for our children. We're building an ark for Ren, for Noah, for Grayson, for Red. We're building it for all of our babies. We're building it so that their babies can someday maybe be able to put us on here and cry with us, celebrate us, remember the dumb things we said and the ways we hurt them, and also the ways we loved them and gave them something to survive the future. Because we love our kids. And I think that's where Jesus is, in the death, in the children, in the truth, in each other. Like really, literally in each other. Like I look out at you and I'm like, I cannot believe that this community still loves me sometimes after some of the things I do or say. Like, and so I just want to say that I love you all. But I literally could not imagine walking this road of following Jesus without this community. Following Jesus is hard. so scary. But it does feel lighter. The burden feels lighter when we do it together. It really does. So I don't know. I don't know if we'll survive or not. I don't know what the future holds. I really don't. But whatever comes, like there's something so grounding to just be with all y'all. Like everyone here included. Like all of us. So pray with me, please. To the God who rules over life and death, the God buried in the abyss, to whom light and dark are the same, the God whose love we feel in our bones, we feel in our flesh. May you guide us with visions, with actions towards an unknown future. Maybe someday as we look back, we can say, I did have faith. Never knew that's what it was. Amen.